Hey everyone, welcome to the Ampscript Bootcamp Day 5. And thanks everyone for joining and being on your path for continuous learning. And today's speaker, Cameron Robert. So he's gonna share all his insights about the Salesforce functions, the HTTP functions, and the contact functions that fall into the Ampscript functionality. So I wanna take this opportunity and give a shout out to Cam for all the efforts that he have been putting in for the community. And his recent release of the new version of the SFMC companion and all the videos that he has been doing, it's been like 3+ years or so. He has been continuously posting some informational videos and content for the benefit of the community. Thank you very much, Robert. And I'm so eager to test the new version of the SFMC companion. And if you can you please give a brief overview of SFMC companion before we get started?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, JB. So yeah, Cam, lovely to meet you all. And as JB just said, I just released as of last night, it's 11 a.m. this morning for me, the new version 0.3.0 of the SFMC Companion Chrome extension. It's been over a year now. It's been, I think, 13 months since I first deployed the very first alpha build. And it's a Chrome extension designed to be your companion. Simple as that. It's a Marketing Cloud companion tool. There are so many little things in Marketing Cloud that we do every day, those repeatable tasks that you have to wait for the UI to load, or you have to go and navigate and try and find things. And those little looking for things, those little processes you do throughout the day just add up to time and to frictions and latency of doing your job. So I built the companion to try and make those gaps smaller, to make those frictions less cumbersome, less burdenous, so you can do your job better and faster. I've got some great videos I've posted on my YouTube channel about what the functions of the companion are and some ways you can use it to save time in your day-to-day job. The new version adds a whole lot of new features, including a new way that I can now inject code into the Marketing Cloud interface. So I've actually got some widgets that pop up inside of Automation Studio, so it makes your day a lot easier. You don't have to pause automations to inspect the objects in them. You can now go directly to those objects from your automation. So some great time savers. I hope you enjoy using it. If you do, there is a section, an options section on the extension, which goes through to the feedback and bug fix form. Please use that. If you find any bugs, I'd love to hear if you've got problems with it, so I can try and fix those bugs. But also any feedback you have too, I'd love to hear it. You can also find me on the How to SFMC, the SFMC DG, and the Email Geeks Slack channels. So feel free to reach out there as well. But we are here today to talk about some really exciting stuff, Ampscript, of course. And as JB alluded to, this is day 5 of the Ampscript training session. So with that, JB, I might take things away and we'll get started. So as I just mentioned, my name is Cam. I'm a solution architect. I've been doing Marketing Cloud now for about 7, going on 8 years. I started my journey on customer side, doing implementation for a customer, using it as a customer, so sending out those daily emails every day. I then moved from the customer side to a partner. So I was partner side for about 1.5 years, and I've since then moved into Salesforce. So I've done all 3, partner side, customer side, and now Salesforce side. You can find me on LinkedIn and YouTube. And of course, you can also find the SMC Companion on the Google Chrome Store. Now for today, I've got a few topics to go through. It's day 5 of the Ampscript functions, and today we're going to be focusing on these 3 topics: the Salesforce functions, the HTTP functions, and the contact functions. Now, as I go through each of these, I'm going to be doing more of a explanatory of what these functions are. The details and documentation on the Salesforce pages are really good as they are. You'll find that they actually cover a lot of information about how the function is built, how the syntax is used. It's great documentation there already. Plus a huge shout out to Elliot and Adam with their SFMC Ampscript guide, website, and book. They also cover more documentation on these functions and give additional examples to help you understand how they work. Beyond that, you also find more documentation for these features and functions across things like Stack Exchange and some of the Salesforce communities, and of course, the Success community as well. So I'm not going to go too much into the actual syntax of the functions because there's so much already covered there. What I do want to cover is why and where you'll be using these functions. In your day-to-day, these functions are just functions. They're there for you to use. I want to talk about why and where you use them, how you use them, how they can change the way you do things. So without further ado, let's kick things off with everyone's favorite, Salesforce objects. So these first ones, the Salesforce group of Ampscript functions, can only be activated by customers who have the Marketing Cloud Connect installed. That is, they have their Marketing Cloud connected to their Salesforce org. Now, the first function for today is the create Salesforce object function. Now, I do have a video on this one as well. So you can Google that one, you'll find it. And I also have a PDF of this sent out, which JB, if you want, you can share with the community. And they can see I've got these all linked up as well. So even this links up to the documentation for this object and the video there as well. So oops, back onto create. So what does it do? Well, the create object is exactly what it sounds like. The create Salesforce object is going to create a new record inside of a Salesforce object using the values you specified in the function. So within Marketing Cloud, I can go and add a new record into any object, like a data extension inside of Salesforce CRM, when the Ampscript function is called. So as an example, I've got some example code here, and I can see that I can set the var of ID to be set to create Salesforce object. I'm going to create in the vouchers object. I'm going to create a record with these two things, the contact being the subscriber key and the code being welcome 1. I want to create a new record with these parameters. So why and where would you use this? Well, I've used this create voucher one for a reason. You may be doing things in Marketing Cloud with your Marketing Cloud data, because remember, you're getting data from other systems into Marketing Cloud to send emails out. You may be generating vouchers at time of send in Marketing Cloud. And so if Marketing Cloud is generating a voucher or querying a system to make a voucher, the only Marketing Cloud knows about that voucher. So how do you get that voucher elsewhere? Well, if you have Salesforce CRM, you could use the create Salesforce object call to then pass that object into Salesforce CRM to create a new row in the voucher object to say, hey, this contact now has this voucher code. The same thing could be done if a customer was to, for example, receive an NPS survey in their inbox from Marketing Cloud and go through to a cloud page. That cloud page has the usual 1 to 10 NPS score. And if the user was to click on a number that's below 7, you could make a new object in the case object in Salesforce, a new case to go and ask that customer, less than 7 score, what happened? Maybe if they gave a score of 10, you could create a new case for get a customer recommendation request going, get the PR person to reach out to that customer and ask for a comment to put on the website. So using this function inline in your cloud pages, your emails, even your SMSs, gives you the ability to create objects inside of your Salesforce CRM to put data that was authored inside Marketing Cloud into your Salesforce CRM. So it's a great function, again, for those who are using the Marketing Cloud Connect. It means you can send that data from your Marketing Cloud up into the CRM for every other system and user to get access to. So moving on, and I should say too, as we go through today, please make sure you use the hands up emoji, or you can use the chat as well. Love to answer any questions you have as we go through. I do want to have some Q&A time at the back of this call today as well. But moving on, we do have the retrieve Salesforce object. So this one, as you can probably already read, is a retrieval function. I don't want to create stuff, I want to get it back. I want to, in real time, talk to my Salesforce CRM and get data from it into Marketing Cloud. So it retrieves rows, simple as that. Very similar to a lookup rows function in Ampscript, except going to the CRM, not to data extensions. Here's an example. We can retrieve a Salesforce objects from the case object. I want to retrieve the fields of ID, subject, and description where the contact in the case object is equal to my subscriber key. Or another way of saying that is, within the case object, so all cases have been raised, I want to find a particular case that's related to, or the cases related to my subscriber key. So it could be a way that you could say, look, I want to create a landing page for my subscribers, but I want it to change based on their cases. If they have an open case or an open dispute or a product complaint or otherwise, maybe change certain aspects of my cloud page so I don't allude to certain things because I've got an active complaint going. It could be that in one of your emails, you actually want to create a case link and say, here are your recent 3 cases. And so you could want to, at time of send, make this call, retrieve those case links and say, hey, here are your current 3 open cases. So there's some great ways that you can then use this real-time data. Now, bear in mind, you could do this another way too, by using the lookup rows function to your Salesforce objects that you are synchronizing through the synchronized data extensions. You could do that. But, and as the question coming through, yes, when I say Salesforce CRM, I do mean Sales and Service Cloud. So Salesforce CRM just being the colloquial Salesforce platform, so Sales and Service Cloud. You can use, of course, the lookup rows to your Salesforce synchronous data extensions, but those do have a sync delay of as little as 15 minutes, but it could be a bit longer as well, depending on your configuration. This one, however, is Ampscript, and it uses an API to do it in real time. So it does mean at time of send or time of call, you're getting the exact data exactly as it occurs in the CRM at that moment, rather than waiting up to 15 minutes to see what happens next. So when would you use it? Why would you use it? Well, like I just said, it's to get data in real time from the CRM. Marketing Cloud is getting data eventually from the CRM, but if you want it in real time for communication purposes, or if you want to update it as well, don't forget when you click on the view email as a web page, it re-renders the whole email, and you may want to change the cases or things that appear in the email when you re-render it. Or on a cloud page, if you want to refresh a cloud page and show new things, the API here will be much more real time than doing a lookup rows. So very useful function, and definitely one, if you do use Marketing Cloud Connect, you'll be using this one all the time. Very, very common one to use. Rounding off some of our key Salesforce ones, of course, is the update. So we've done a creation, we've done a retrieval. What about update? Something exists and now we're changing it. Well, why would you change something? Well, a great use case could be you've sent an email and a customer has responded in that email. For example, it could be you've just purchased a product. We want your feedback. We've opened up a case and the case has a blank score for NPS. We haven't got your NPS score yet. You go to the cloud page and you tick on the NPS score. And when you do that, we're not going to create a new NPS record. We're going to update the existing case record with your NPS score. On the example here, we could say it's an email change. You've done your preference center, and in the preference center has an email box. You can change your email. Well, when you submit that preference page, I want to change your email, not just in my data extension, not just in all subscribers, but also in the Salesforce CRM. So I can update my, in this case, a lead object, to change my email to be my brand new specified email. Again, in real time using the API, which is great. So another one that's going to be used a lot if you are using the Marketing Cloud Connector on cloud pages, probably not so much on emails on send. You could find ways to use it, but it's more going to be on things like cloud pages and preference pages. All right, moving on to one that I do not see used as often though, the retrieve Salesforce job sources. Now, this one is a bit of a different one. It's a bit newer as well, but you can use it to retrieve some of the email job information. Now, first and foremost, I have not actually had a reason to use this one just yet, so I'm going to base this a lot off the documentation piece, but it does give you the ability to find out why a customer was sent a job. So it shows you the source of how a customer was sent an email record. The examples that were provided back is things like if an email was triggered, a distributed marketing email was triggered by a report, it will show you that this subscriber was triggered by that report. The job ID for this subscriber was initiated by a report. And so it does give you a bit of an auditability to go back and backtrace how that subscriber got the email or why they were sent it from that Salesforce source, of course. Otherwise, you would use data extension sources. But this one does go back against the job ID back into a Salesforce source. Survey force question in the chat there. So no, not replacing, just specifying that you can build a lot of things in cloud pages. You can, of course, build a preference page or an NPS survey page on a cloud page. And if you were to, then you could use those functions I talked about using these Salesforce Ampscript commands to update, create, and retrieve information from the Salesforce CRM based on the NPS survey. So it doesn't replace any functions. It's more that you could do it in Marketing Cloud with these functions, should you choose to. All right, and rounding off our Salesforce objects comes the long SFID. Now, this one is going to be a bit of a niche case. You probably won't need to use it until you do, but if you do, you know why. So all it does is it takes the normal shortened 15-character long Salesforce IDs, ones that you're familiar with, the 00Qs, 003s, 005s, takes those IDs and turns them into their longer 18-digit Salesforce IDs. Now, the last 3 digits are just a little checksum that goes on to the actual Salesforce ID, fun fact, but you don't need it in Marketing Cloud. So if you ever wanted it or needed to get it for some reason, you can use this function to convert the short Salesforce ID into a long Salesforce ID. Those long IDs can be required by external systems to then API back into Salesforce CRM. So you could use it for that reason, but then you're kind of going from Salesforce to Marketing Cloud to another third-party system back into Salesforce, which is a bit weird. So again, probably won't use this one too much in my opinion, but if you do, you know what it does and you've probably seen this one before anyway. That rounds off the Salesforce questions. Again, feel free to use the chat as we go through today. I want to make sure I'm answering any use case questions that you may have. But we'll tick on, as you're thinking of your questions, onto now our HTTP section. So first and foremost, GET. Now, for those who do not know the HTTP protocol, there are various ways or methods that these calls can be created. The most popular one, of course, is GET, because you are getting information from a source. When you go into your Chrome or Safari or Firefox or otherwise web browser and you type in google.com or salesforce.com, you're going to be calling a GET function. Your computer is getting information from a source. It's a GET request. Now we can, not rather than doing things through your web browser on your device, we can tell Marketing Cloud's servers to go and get information for us and to store it as a variable. So we can do a GET request, and the example on the screen at the moment is a HTTP GET. We're going to get the information from example.com. Now, of course, if you did this, you'd be getting back the HTML payload of that website, which is pretty useless, all things considered. However, API endpoints, like the ones in Marketing Cloud, do use a GET protocol as well. And they don't return HTML, they're going to return a JSON payload, which of course you can now play with in Ampscript thanks to the new update. So GET requests are really popular ways of getting data from a third-party web accessible server to then store the response as a variable inside of your email cloud page or otherwise. When would you use this and why would you use this? Well, again, there are some great APIs out there. One of the ones that I always give when I do training is the, I think it's called Can Has Dad Jokes. I Can Has Dad Jokes. It's a dad joke API. If you type in dad joke API, you'll find it. It's a free API with a whole lot of different ways of accessing the API. It's a great practice endpoint that you can use to see if you can make these scripts work for yourself in your own emails and cloud pages. When you do the GET call, you have to specify a few parameters. When you do the GET call, it's going to return back for you either the payload of the API response or the entire web page, depending on how you call it. When I do use this function, it is to call an API endpoint. So again, even the Salesforce documentation for the REST APIs do have some GET calls you can do. And those GET calls, again, return a payload, which you can then use inside your email. Those payloads could be to get a subscriber status, to get records in a data extension, to get some results from a product feed, whatever you need. You make that request, you store the response, and you can use that response in your email to do a loop through the response or to take apart the response to use that data in your email or cloud page. You won't need to use this function, again, until you do, but when you do, you're going to be using it a lot. It's a very cool function. If you do have a use case to put it into a cloud page, it's well worth learning. So try now, go and Google the dad joke, free dad joke API. I think it's called Can Has Dad Joke. And it shows you all the API documentation for it. You can play with it for yourself. Now, I should mention too, and great question there from D, even though the function says HTTP GET, the actual call is done in whatever you specify. My example here is using HTTP. That's what's on the documentation page, by the way. But it will, if you choose to, use HTTPS. It does whatever call you tell it to. The function does not get called HTTPS GET. It's just HTTP GET is the function name. You specify the URL, including the S or not S in your URL call here. So just be aware of that, but good question. All right, and like I mentioned, there are multiple ways you can call these functions. GET is one of them, and POST is the other. So just like a GET, a POST is another methodology. It does default if you don't specify things correctly. So do specify HTTPS if you can, particularly in the new Chrome world. They do have some blockers on a lot of things, so use S where possible. Some much older API endpoints still use the HTTP functionality because they're not sending sensitive data, but that'll come down to your endpoints. I think the dad jokes one is a HTTPS one, so it's a bit more safer to use, but play around, have some fun with it. So like I was saying, there are different methods of calling these functions, and the other method, of course, is the POST method. Now, there are two POST calls that you have access to inside Marketing Cloud. I've got those two calls showing in the example code at the bottom of your screen right now, POST 1 and POST 2. So what are POSTs? Well, just like a GET, where we are making a GET request, I want to type an address, I'm going to get information from the address and bring it back. A POST is just what it sounds like. I'm going to post information to a destination and then get a response. So whenever you log in, for example, to a platform, you type in your username and your password and you press submit. Well, what that website is doing is it's packaging up your username and password, encrypting it usually. It's going to post it to an end service. The end service receives your post, does some things, and then returns back to you a success or failure response. So I'm going to send information, I'm going to post it to you, and then I'm going to listen for the response. And that response could be a payload of information. It could be anything. In fact, even in the Marketing Cloud REST API documentation, a lot of those REST calls are post calls because you post a criteria. I want to receive these content blocks. I want to know what's in this data extension. You post information, and then it sends you back the payload. So with that in mind, when would you use a post? Well, most API endpoints that want to create a new record, for example, actually most times create new records, use a post call. So in the example on the screen, this could be on post 2 that I'm going to post to the example.com with some text HTML. I'm going to post some information. I'm going to post a payload of information, some example content. I think is, at the moment, the content here is blank, but it would be some example content to create an account or to create something at an API endpoint. Again, the individual API documentations that you use this for will dictate what method you must use, get or post or patch or put or otherwise, but you do have access in Ampscript to those two main methods, get and post. The difference, though, between post and post 2, as you can see, there are two functions, two separately documented functions for Marketing Cloud. Well, you can probably see from the examples here, post just by itself is a much smaller, simpler command, while post 2 has a lot more ordinals, a lot more ability for this function to do more for you, particularly when it comes to the headers that are sent through. So if you are doing a post which requires some authorization or some very specific headers to be put in, very much recommend that you use post 2. That way you can specify the header value syntax. So the header of authorization, the value of example, the header of user agent, and the value of example. So post 2 is what I use a lot more than post 1, but again, you can use them both depending on what the API allows you to do that you're trying to connect to. When would you use this? So again, cloud pages, most of the time. If someone does something on a cloud page, for example, if they submit something on a cloud page, you want to post that back to another service. Again, it could be your ticketing service, your vouchering engine, something else you have in the background that runs that you have to connect into Marketing Cloud. You could use this post function to send that data to that platform via this API. So again, really highly used. I have made a video on this one as well because it is actually a very, very good function to know about. Practice it for yourself as well. There are some post endpoints. I'm not sure if the dad joke one does post, but play with it, figure it out, learn it for yourself, because when you do have to use them, it can take a little bit of time to figure this one out. It's worth training and practicing for it now. I think my video does go through a couple of examples. You can try it for yourself, but I'll leave you to watch the video on your own time. Moving on, requesting a header. So when you make these requests, and just a question coming through, with us right back to the CRM engagement data. Not sure on that question. Sorry, if you can expand that question briefly, that'd be great. As you do, I'll just keep going with the request header one. So request header, when you make a request, get or put or post or otherwise, when you make that request, there's certain headers that your browser or your server is sending through as part of that request. Think of this as like if you're going to post a letter. The letter's in an envelope, and the envelope contains a letter with a letterhead. That letterhead is telling the reader of that letter who you are, what the header is. You know, what are you about? What's your logo? Where'd you come from? That header of information is important. And you can request the header information through this Ampscript call. So if someone is making a request to your cloud page, get or post, you can do these things yourself. You can request to know what headers were being sent through from the requestor. So what headers can you ask for? Well, you can't ask for this header, please. Just so you know, not a real header, but there is a list of valid headers that you can do on this wiki link here. Now, there is a conformative structure of the web protocol that you have to use, which I think is a little bit smaller than this actual list. In the actual documentation, I've linked it here in the header. You can see the exact code. I forgot the code number off the top of my head, but there is a specific list of headers that you can access. They are really cool headers, though, well worth exploring. There are some really cheeky things you can get out of a request header, including what device they're on, their screen, their operating system, some really cool things. Which, speaking of, it brings us to our next function, which is a CHTML browser. So what is a CHTML browser? Well, are you a browser that has a specific rendering engine of HTML designed for smaller screened devices like phones and tablets? Those devices do run on a different kind of HTML protocol designed for smaller screens, as you may have noticed when you do your litmus and email and acid tests. So this is a little true false returning piece, which identifies, is the user agent, the device browser that's been used to connect and make a request, is this device likely a mobile device? So why would you want that? Why would you want on a cloud page to know if it's a mobile device? Can't we just do mobile responsive code? Well, yes, you totally can. But that mobile responsive code doesn't change the actual HTML in the page. It just changes how the HTML is rendered for the viewer. If you want to change the actual HTML, the actual rendered up code on a cloud page, you must do things programmatically before the page is displayed to the customer. And so you have to do some server-side calls, one of those being this Ampscript call. So you could use the is.chtml browser to request the header of the user agent to see if the user agent, which is the browser, of the requesting customer is a known mobile browser. And if so, you could do something different. You could change the menu context to be more mobile friendly, more touch friendly. You could enable things like a telephone one-click call, which of course is useless for a desktop browser because you can't one-click call on a desktop. But for a phone, you could put the tel code around it and now make it into a one-click. So little things you can do because you've now made this call on your page. You know if the user's using a mobile browser or a desktop browser. Some pretty cool stuff. Some more that you may have seen, the redirect to. Now, you must have seen this one, surely, if you've done any kind of programmatic link building in your emails. The redirect to function is an absolute necessity to make sure that your links are being wrapped and packaged correctly for tracking purposes. If you don't use this function, your links will likely break. So in the example code you can see below, I've got an A tag here where the href is equal to redirect to link. Now that @link variable could be salesforce.com/search for Cam. But I've built that using static text and some Ampscript. And I have to concat that together in Ampscript and build it into a link. But what's most important, though, is you then have to wrap that again in the redirect to make sure Marketing Cloud's renderer on the way out that's sending the email knows, hey, make sure I render this link, build it all together into a link, and then call it a link to then track it and tag it properly. And when you do this, you will get the click tracking appended properly, as well as all the UTM or other Web Analytics connector parameters added to it as well. If you don't use that, it may bypass those checks as you press send in your email, which means you may not get things appended like link tracking, which of course for email marketing is a no-go. You will make sure your links are always tracked. So always, 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 if you are programmatically building your links in any way, if you're using Ampscript to formulate a link, that is, if the link is not static text, always wrap it in redirect to. Safest thing you can do. URL encoding. So a bit more fun. You may have noticed if you ever go into Google or Chrome or otherwise, and you type something into the browser, and you sometimes see that %20 sign gets put up, those 3 characters, %20, that's the URL encoding for a space. So in the example here, first space name is the example, but that's not the correct website code. If you were to copy that right now, put it into your Chrome URL, it would convert the space into %20 to make it a continual string of text with no spaces. That's what this function does. It does that for you without copying and pasting it into text. Now, this also it's pretty important because there are a lot of special characters that people sometimes accidentally include. If you do your word processing in Microsoft Word, you may have found that the quotation marks are the slanted quotation marks. And those are special characters. They're not UTF-8 encode characters or GSM characters, sorry. They're slightly different. And so their encoding, the way they show up in a URL will be different because of that different character that's been used. They're not the usual free text quotations. That spaces and other special characters have to be URL encoded if it's going to work in your browser and be interpreted by the server that you connect to. So you can use URL encode inside your email to make sure whatever links you are generating have been encoded correctly. Now, for some modern browsers, you can skip this step technically because modern browsers will detect it and do it for you because it's a bit lazy. But best practice is do it properly, URL encode. All right, on to the next one, and we have the wrapping long URL. You're probably not going to need this, not going to lie. This is a very patch fix for a very old known problem back in the Outlook 2007 days. It's where some URLs were too long for some rendering engines to process, and so it would just chop off. It would totally cut the end of the URL off. That's obviously no good. So it would have this function you could use if your URLs were known to be too long. This would wrap them into a smaller tracked URL so that it would actually bypass that limitation of other rendering platforms. Now, again, this was a known issue from well over a decade ago. So chances of you needing to use it today is much, much less. I'm not going to say zero. There's probably still someone out there who uses Microsoft 2007, but the chance of you having to use this to triage things in your business units, pretty close to zero. If you have this problem though, here is your solution. Very specific. So if you do have to have the problem, again, look up the wrap long URL. It's probably going to be well documented in some very, very old blog posts, but that is the solution inside Marketing Cloud to make sure those URLs don't get above, I think it's 920 something characters long is what it has to be. All right. Which brings us to our last function for today, leaving our HTML functions and jumping now into our last one, which is our contact function. We have an upsert contact function. Now, this one is still locked into the mobile contacts only. It doesn't allow you to activate things inside the email contacts just yet, but it still gives you a great way of not having to use an API AWS proxy to modify information about a contact in Mobile Connect. So the example on your screen you can see is we're going to upsert contact on the mobile object. We're going to modify the phone number of this contact to be, where the phone number is equal to the mobile number, we're going to change their zip code. So it allows you to update information about a contact. Now, this is going to be pretty useful because just like your all subscribers for emails has a status and an email address the Marketing Cloud listens to. Mobile Connect is the same thing. The Mobile Connect, I think it's called Mobile Demographics, is just like all subscribers for emails. So you do have this all subscribers table for mobile, but it's called Mobile Demographics. And in this table, there is no subscriber key. There is a contact ID, but that's different. What you do have is a mobile phone number. So you can look up a mobile phone number. I do have a data view diagram that I've done. If someone has that link on hand, then feel free to paste it into the chat. But I do have a data view diagram that shows the connections between all the different data views inside Marketing Cloud. This particular one, the mobile address data view, again, there's no subscriber key by default. If you do an updated contact, though, you can, against the mobile phone number, go and make adjustments. And this is pretty important. If you have someone who has called your call center or written in or something and said, please stop sending me SMSs, my phone number has changed. You can use this function to have their phone number changed to the new phone number. If they say, please change my status to be inactive. I don't want to be subscribed anymore to mobiles. I want to be unsubscribed. Of course, they can reply stop to the SMS, but if that doesn't work, you can use that status here as well. So you can upsert their contact to change their status from active to inactive. There is more. There is locale, which is, I think, D you're referring to as country code. Locale is pretty critical. That does actually link the Marketing Cloud SMS service to the correct provider in each region. So that is one thing you have to be careful of. Do you need a country code, though? Again, country code is probably locale that you're referring to. You do need a locale specified so that Marketing Cloud knows which SMS aggregator to use to send the SMS out to. When you do purchase a Mobile Connect license, you specify what regions you want the license activated in, and those licenses are correlated to certain locales, which are certain country codes. So you have to make sure that for each phone number that you have, that you do specify the correct locale code for it. Marketing Cloud does have some smarts. There is an API function, and I think there is actually an import method that you can tick as well, which will do some normalization of data down to country code level. Be careful with that because it does mean you're changing your customer's data. If they made a typo, then you're just going to reinforce that typo. So it is ideal if you just get data clean on the way in, and then you can import the correct mobile phone numbers into Mobile Connect. So when would you use this? Like I said, a preference center where you actually have a cloud page preference center where a customer can change their phone number, can change their opt-in status for SMSs. That's where you could use this function. You could do it as well as part of a keyword conversation with a customer. So it could be an update your postal address or update your postcode or update your state or otherwise. These are some of the fields in the mobile demographics, by the way. You could have that as a part of a keyword conversation with a customer, and you could use this Ampscript call in those responses in the SMS messages that you build to then gradually update and breadcrumb and backfill in the rest of their profile in Mobile Connect. You could do that too, but again, the use case is dependent. You could also use a data extension and input data extension, do it that way. Lots of ways you can solve these things. Again, it's a great one to get around the need to use AWS proxy or the update contact API, which requires obviously contact keys and things to be raised. So this is a great little workaround that you can use. are we able to get the inferred IP to check the phone number? Again, I'm sorry for that question. Not too sure what you mean by the inferred IP to check the phone number. But while you write out that question, so different countries have different, when you say spam caller, remember this is SMS after all. So when you're sending out SMSs, there is new protocols in some countries where you have to register your phone number and your from name address, which is then registered against the Telecommunications Act in each country. So there are some of those things to prevent spam texts and things from going out from Marketing Cloud. As for coming in, well, Marketing Cloud will listen to all things that come in. That's why it's very important you don't have all these start keywords and things active, because you could be subscribing spam callers to your Mobile Connect and choking up your contacts. That comes down to how you then want to activate your Mobile Connect product, but different options around there, of course. As we continue, though, we'll go on to my last leaving notes, and that's where to learn more Ampscript. So I talked a lot about some functions today, and like I said, I don't want to talk too much about the syntax or the actual functions themselves, more your practical usage of them. So do reference the documentation. Again, the PDF, which will be produced from this slideshow, does have all the links to documentation. You can also Google ones you've seen today, because I have used all the correct terms for them. So you will find the Salesforce documentation, and you'll definitely find, thanks to the SEO of Adam and Elliot, the Ampscript guide. You'll also find their documentation very, very helpful as well. Shout out to them and all their hard work. But where else to learn? So beyond this call, the documentation. Of course, the Salesforce documentation is the best first place to go for what's actually used in the platform. It's pretty well updated, and they do make changes as functions are upgraded or as new ones are released. So it's a great place to have bookmarked as a point of reference for your functions. It's also a great library of functions to see as well, the Ampscript function reference library. You will see about 200 functions, all listed in one great big table. So you can, in your own time, go through and just read those and see just what's possible in Ampscript. You're, of course, very welcome to listen to all the days of the Ampscript conversations here today as well. But it's a great list to have, just to scroll through and see what functions you may not have heard of and you want to hear more information about. Once you have that, of course, you can go to places like the Ampscript guide. So it is ampscript.guide. It is Adam Spriggs and Elliot Harper's blog and book. And you'll find on that page some great documentation. What I do love about this website particularly is they take the documentation and go one step further and usually give an extra couple of examples. They also augment some of the ways that the syntax of the functions are used. There are some functions that allow you to use continuing name value pairs, and they document that beautifully in their documentation, which the Salesforce documentation does not do well. So a great place to reference these codes, Ampscript guide. Moving on, YouTube. We're probably going to be watching this video if you're not already watching it there right now. Just breaking down the fourth wall for you. YouTube's a great place to go to learn things as well. There are plenty of providers in the community who have been doing this for years and are very happy to speak about these functions. Google it, find a YouTube video and listen to it, and you'll find usually some very practical use cases of how to use these functions. The Trailblazer community groups, just like this one today that JB is running, are also a great place to raise questions and to find out more about these functions. This conversation today was arisen because there were questions about Ampscript. There was a desire in the community to know more about Ampscript, and so this is the response to then train more Ampscript functions. If you're a part of another community, or perhaps you're not sure if there's one in your local area, go to Trailblazer communities and Google your site, your city, your location in that Trailblazer community page, and you'll find local groups around you. If there's not a Marketing Cloud one near you, you can start one as well, and start this process of learning, enablement, and training in your own regions as well. And finally, if you do want to have some more practical things, a new release is the Ampscript 30 Challenge, a great initiative that's been run. You can jump onto that website, I think it's ampscript30.com, and you can go through and solve some of the Ampscript challenges for yourself. Now, the challenges, of course, are designed to be nice bite-sized challenges, so they won't cover some of the more complex Salesforce integrations we've done today, but there are some great ones there that you can go through and learn how the syntax works, how you can apply them to your day-to-day usage. Some great resources, as you can see, to go forth and learn more Ampscript for yourself. For now, though, I do want to open up for any questions. If you do have any questions for the functions we covered today. Otherwise, there were 4 days prior to today worth of learning, and there are obviously more days to come under JB's mentorship as well. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's go through of the Salesforce HTTP and the contact functions. I hope you have good fun learning and you can use these functions in your business units in days to come.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Cam. And thank you for answering the questions as you are going through the topics. Wonderful.
My pleasure.
So I don't see any of the questions. You have covered all the questions during the session itself. Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you. Thank you for joining today's session. And we will be posting this recording soon on the YouTube. And be sure to follow all the videos that Cam has linked. He has some wonderful content on his YouTube channel as well that has more in detail use cases and the usage as well, I believe. So we can wrap up this session with that. Any questions, please post in the Slack channel after the session if you still have any questions. And thanks, everyone. And thank you, Robert. We'll talk to you again sometime.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one,
this is
everyone.
great.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.